All right, in the time that we have left, let's look at a couple of different Jewish worship practices. Holidays, other things that are important in the practice of Judaism. The first is the Sabbath, or Shabbat in Hebrew. Shabbat begins at sunset on Friday and continues into sunset on Saturday. There are a variety of things that can take place, and usually there's differences among different types of Jews. There might be some people going to a service at a synagogue. Usually there's also some sort of Sabbath meal that families will engage in, lighting of candles, a variety of prayers offered. In many cases there is the eating of a kind of braided bread known as challah bread, the CH meaning that hard H sound, not challah bread, challah bread. No work is to be done on the Sabbath, as we've talked about, but there are a variety of ways that this is understood. Orthodox Jews, for example, will walk to synagogue, but Reformed Jews will drive. Other things not to be done on the Sabbath include handling money, lighting a fire, and we've talked about that before, no cooking. And Saturday is usually spent by many Jews at synagogue services or in contemplation or study. Leads us into talking about synagogues. A big focus of Jewish worship from the time of the destruction of the temple onward has been the synagogue. Synagogues have been found throughout the what was the Roman Empire. Many of them near water. Many of them face toward the east or toward Jerusalem, and many also featuring a variety of similar types of structures. In modern synagogues, there are a couple of things that are still relatively present. You don't need to get this list down, but I do want to talk briefly about it. In many synagogues, there is a chest or an ark that holds a copy of the Torah. Usually, a very expensive copy of the Torah, very ornate. Usually the most expensive thing in the synagogue. And synagogues will pay a lot of money to get a very ornate copy of the Torah. Usually there is also an eternal light. In this picture, a candle, but today, electric light. But a light that is never turned off, suggesting the continuity of God's presence. God is always there. Usually a menorah or a candlestick, right, 7 branched to reflect the lampstand in the temple. There was a 7-branched lampstand in the temple, and so the menorah in the synagogue. Usually a copy of the 10 Commandments, and then a variety of places for reading or a rabbinical sermon, etc. And certainly, Quarterman goes into more detail. But are there any questions? Anything I need to clarify? Again, you don't need to know those numbers. That picture is not going to show up on the exam. But you should know what a synagogue is. Now into the Jewish calendar. So Shabbat, occurring every week, but other days and other ceremonies found throughout the year. Rosh Hashanah is the Jewish New Year, usually found toward the harvest time of the year. So we're talking September, October. The lunar calendar often leads to why you find them in different times or in different months. Also important at the same time is Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah the first day of the first month, Yom Kippur the 10th day of that month. Rosh Hashanah is meant to be a time of spiritual renewal, a remembrance of the creation of the earth. On the 10th day is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Usually in the days leading up to Rosh Hashanah, the blowing of a ram's horn or a shofar occurs frequently, reminding the people that you're going to stand before God. Yom Kippur in the temple times was focused on sacrifice. 2 goats would be brought before the high priest. One was to be sacrificed, the other would be released into the wilderness. A lot of the focus, of course, was on sacrifice and sin, because the sacrificed goat would then have its blood drained and blood would be presented before God in the most holy place. With no temple, of course, there aren't the sacrifices. Instead, the focus is more on kind of a personal inner cleansing. It's a time to examine your life and say, are there people that I might need to forgive? Are there people that I have offended in the past year? And it's a time of fasting and engaging in reconciliation. Continuing around the calendar is the celebration of Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights. Originally, it was connected with the rededication of the temple after the Maccabean revolt. According to the legend, when the Jews regained control of the temple from the Greeks, there was only 1 jar of lamp oil that had not been defiled. It was still sealed. It still bore the seal of the high priest. But that jar of oil was only enough oil to light the lamps for 1 day. Yet this miraculous jar allowed the lamps to burn for 8 days, hence the 8 days or 8 nights of Hanukkah. Today, many families give gifts to each other on the 8 nights, kind of an attempt to kind of lessen the pressures of Christmas on, especially in the United States, other places in the West. Although many Jews also celebrate Christmas secularly, and then of course there's a lot of intermarriage as well. Also important is the lighting of a menorah, but a 9-branched menorah. You can also find it in a variety of other features. He does not look very happy to be wearing that menorah hat. Children especially will spin the dreidel. It's essentially a top with 4 letters on each of the sides that stand for 4 words of a sentence, which essentially is a great miracle happened there. Right? So, reminder of the miracle of Hanukkah. I include this last picture here, not because it tells us anything about Hanukkah, but it's really kind of a fascinating one. This is actually from a deli in New York. I'm not sure if you can quite make it out, but it says, "Delicious for Hanukkah, boneless spiral ham." Let you think about that in a minute. All right, this actual sign. The store was called on the carpet for it, obviously, and so they changed it to "Delicious for the holidays." But New York, of all places, right? You sizable Jewish population, but delicious for Hanukkah. And you'll also see Hanukkah spelled in a variety of ways, sometimes with just the H, the CH, meant to be that hard sound, right? Hanukkah, not Chanukah. If you have any Jewish friends, don't wish them happy Chanukah. Sometimes with 2 Ks, sometimes with 1 K. Around the calendar again, now into the spring. Hanukkah usually somewhere between late October, November, sometimes into December. But Passover in the spring, rooted in the story of the Exodus, the escape of Israelites, or the salvation of Israelites from Egyptian slavery. And so the angel of death passed over the houses with the blood on the doorposts. Now, the meal associated with the Passover was something that could be eaten rather quickly, bread that had not been leavened so it did not rise, roast lamb, etc. The meal, of course, was to be repeated every year at the same time in order to remember the deliverance of the Exodus. The beginning of Passover is marked by the eating of this meal known as a Seder. In the Seder, there are a variety of things that show up on the table. In the right-hand corner picture is the Passover plate, or the Seder plate. It includes a variety of foods and other things to remind people of the Passover, things that weren't necessarily a part of that original biblical version. Bitter herbs, which was a part of it, to remember the bitterness of slavery. A sweet fruit and nut mixture known as haroset, which was meant to be a reminder of the mortar used to mold the bricks of the enslaved Israelites. Salt water is a part of the Passover Seder plate, representative of the tears of the slaves. Parsley, a reminder of spring life. An egg, to remind of birth and redemption. And a bone, representing sacrifices in the temple times. An unleavened bread, known as matzah, will also be eaten. A place is usually reserved for the prophet Elijah, who is said to be returning to herald in a time of peace and prosperity. That prophetic announcement at the end of Malachi, which in the New Testament Jesus applies to John the Baptist, but of course Jews don't accept that idea. One last celebration I want to focus on has to do with life cycle. And that's the development of the bar mitzvah or the bat mitzvah. Bar mitzvah means son of the commandment, and was a celebration at the age of 13 to signify entrance into adulthood. It was when a Jewish boy became a man. In the celebration, of course, was the young man was expected to demonstrate the ability to carry out religious responsibilities in the community, so they would be expected to read a passage from the text, particularly the Torah, in Hebrew. They would be expected to answer a variety of questions, and once completed, he would be able to be counted as a part of the synagogue. In conservative and Orthodox Judaism, there must be 10 men present to hold a synagogue service, and so young men who had achieved the bar mitzvah were allowed to be counted. Among conservative and Reform Jews, the bat mitzvah, or daughter of the commandment, celebration has been developed for 13-year-old girls as well as a means of suggesting passing of maturity. For most kids at the age of 13, it's probably more the big party that is thrown that is the highlight of the bar mitzvah rather than the religious ceremony. For other ceremonies, I refer you to Quarteron and to the study guide. Most of the ones on the study guide are ones we highlighted here, but there are, I think, one or two that he talks about that we have. I know that was really kind of quick, but wanted to finish up so that we can start with Islam on Thursday. Any last questions before we finish up? All right.